Okay, it is 8:31 Central Standard Time. I've already had one student to sign into the session about an hour earlier, and I reminded that student that the session started at Central Standard Time. A lot of students get thrown off by the fact that they're on Eastern Standard Time, and so I remind students that all assignments, all lectures, and everything are set to where I am, and it's Central Standard Time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to share my screen. If I can get the right thing to hit. Here we go. And boom, there we go. Okay, I got to move Elena out of the way there. All right, oh, you know what? I'm not supposed to be hearing you because I thought I had muted everybody, but let me go back. Okay, now you're muted. See, I'm not supposed to be able to hear you. So let's go to the classroom. Make sure I do it sharing properly. Here we go. Okay, so anyway, welcome to week 1, or also called the open house in constitutional law. So it's also called con law, which is a little joke that we remind people that con law is not the same as criminal law, because what they try to do is shorten it. Says usually criminals are called cons if they go to jail, but no, this is about the Constitution and the rights that individuals have under the U.S. Constitution. And so my name is Richard Wright, as you probably already know, and if you don't know now, you're going to learn that, and that I will be with you for the next 6 weeks. And 6 weeks can go very, very, very fast, and I encourage students to make sure that they keep up with the assignments. Many of you are in this class, this is a bachelor's class, have had me in your associates, and I have been your instructor there, so you know how I roll. So I'm going to be repeating some things, because there are some people in here that have not had me and will learn a lot of things about me. Tonight's session is advertised as lasting until 10 o'clock. Hope you can stay until 10 o'clock or even a little longer. And the reason being is because this first week is instructional, not about the material, but to set you on the path to be able to complete your 6 weeks very easily. So, and then I'm going to end it by sharing something that is with you about myself, sharing with you about myself, so that you will understand why I say certain things. Well, there's my name, their information, which you've seen already, and my phone number, 630-660-8480, which is also my cell phone number. And pay attention to the note that's under it. It means what it says. It speaks for itself. I say this, and I'm one of the only professors who has done this, and I've done this a long time, and it's worked out pretty well for me. Students can feel free to call me, text me, or email me any hour of the day, the 25th hour of the day. I let students figure what that means, and most of them get it pretty quickly. Now, I will caution you that if you text me, please include your name as well as what course it is that you're in, and then give me the specifics about what your issue is. I do recommend, though, to students, if you have an issue that you want to address, like quick, fast, and in a hurry, the fastest way for me to respond is through texting me or calling me. If you call me, please, whatever you do, leave a voice message, and I will check my messages. You will be surprised that I am up late at night sometimes, and sometimes I will go to bed and I will get up and check the phone, and then I'll go back to bed. I'll check to see if anybody has either called me or texted me, and I will call you back. There have been times when students have called me and they said, "Oh, I'm at work and I can't talk." I says, "Okay, I'm just leaving you a message," and so I'll leave them a message. The point of the matter is that I am one of the most hands-on instructors that you're ever going to run into. And I have this thing that all of my students know about me that have had me before, all of my children in my family that I've raised, and the members of my church that I pastor. And that is that I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. You can take it to the bank. This is not an exaggeration that you see when I say you can call me, text me, or email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. So take advantage of that. You know, I want to help you out as well. Now I want to give you some warnings. Notice rubrics are capitalized. Rubrics are very important in grading. And you're going to discover in this particular course that your rubrics are not in the grade book, but they are included in the modules, not the modules, but in the course homepage. And I think I emailed them to you. Let me check to see. I think I did. Let me look at my course messages. I'm pretty sure that I did. Let me see, sent, and it'll tell me who I sent them to. Nope, I didn't send them to you, but I will send you the rubrics in the email. But in the meantime, they're always on the course homepage, which is the page that you open up when you see. So rubrics are very, very, very important. Pay close attention to the requirements of the rubric to maximize your grades. APA is very, very, very important. We provide details, we provide tutoring, we provide information that will help you with APA, and we have information such as over here, which I'm going to open up, and you can see it, guides to APA. And if you were to click on this, which I will today, and it opens up the APA toolkit, and it tells you things that help you as far as with templates and everything that you want to know about APA, including a short quick start video as well. So you want to make sure APA is very, very, very important in terms of establishing what the citations and the references are, and it also operates on the basis of academic integrity, which I'm going to share you a little short video in just a few minutes. The other important feature is critical thinking. Critical thinking is very important. That involves your sharing information from that good old brain that you have there, analyzing, critiquing the material so that you're able to provide information to me and not just copying and pasting in papers, because I run all of your papers through Grammarly, which, by the way, each of you should be aware of the fact that you have a Grammarly account that's accessible to you by going to the Resources tab and clicking on it, and then you see it right here, among other things, including that video that I'm going to show you. But Grammarly, it tells you how to open an account, and it tells you use it for spelling checking and for plagiarism. And when we say plagiarism here, we're talking about making sure that your critical thinking is higher. If you go above 25% on my chart, which I will run your papers through, you will lose 25% of your points. If you're, I'm 26% of your points, so it's 26 and above. Okay, so you want to make sure that you don't have that happen. So then, very important in the grading of all assignments. I also repeat that information as well down here about APA. Now, you're also, as part of APA, and it'll tell you this, you're required to have a cover sheet properly formatted, which APA will, that information will show you, and noodle tools that are included in there that you'll see. And I remind you that the sole source of your papers shouldn't be the textbook. And if you do, you'll lose 2 points for failure to conduct research. So it's very important. Then I have links down here to various items that can help you as far as writing and library and learning and research. I do encourage you that when you look for sources to use the library and learning resources that our great team has put together. And if you go there, it'll tell you, you hover over these things and tells you things about Grammarly, APA, tutoring. It tells you about a writing guide. It tells you about if you're a new student, and it helps you to find everything that you need. So you want, and then it tells you about databases for finding cases, for finding articles, and things of that nature. I mentioned Noodle Tools earlier that helps you in formatting as well. And then there are webinars that are available to help you in those areas as well. So I encourage you to utilize those resources to help you out. Students sometimes just jump and dive in. Make sure that you get all the details first. Then this provides tutoring. If you run into a problem, I can refer you to a tutor, or you can set up a tutor and it tells you how to connect with a tutor. I will make this announcement to you that tutors are not just for students who are having trouble, and there are students who are specially trained, who are actually some of your classmates maybe, I don't know if they're in this class, but are classmates that can provide information to help you to succeed and maximize your grades. And then there are what we call other tools that help you with your papers. Then I have some articles that helps you as far as going beyond the textbook that addresses research and things like this. I recommend that you download these and use them. Take a look at them. Analytical tips, this helps you with your critical thinking. The importance of information literacy, being able to find credible information. You'll discover one of the sources that I never want to see you use, never want to see you use as a citation or reference, is Wikipedia. Never, ever, ever. If you do, you're going to lose points right off the bat. And then referencing for criminal justice students, we give you how to cite cases and things of that nature. This you don't have to worry about in this class. Then there is a critical thinking video. If you want to just dive into it, it'll tell you, you copy and paste it, put it on your browser, and you can take time to look at that video. Now we get to the rubrics. This is the first written assignment for this week, preamble. It's very short, and the criteria is given on the left, and then on the right are the points that you get. So I grade your papers by looking and see if you satisfy the criteria. Now, I'm very liberal this week with the preamble because the preamble is very short. So you're going to rewrite the preamble. It tells you in the module as well. And you're going to speak on possible future issues, and then meet the page requirement. Now, generally, this would be one full page, but because of the shortness of it, I don't require that in this particular week. So most people don't have a problem here. But what they do have a problem is dealing with this part, the APA and so forth. Now, and the page count. That's what I'm saying. You have enough pages and things like that. But here's my whole point in a nutshell, is that you want to make sure that you satisfy the required page count. Again, you don't have to worry about that too much for this week 1 assignment. And then there's week 2, which we'll talk about next week, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6. And then there's the project. We will talk about the project starting next week. So you have projects for week 2, 3, 4, 5, and then module 6, your final project. That's the last week of classes, okay, which will come very fast. So you should be aware that each of these modules are related to various different ways that you approach. You notice that the whole project is about one amendment. It's the 4th Amendment. And the 4th Amendment I will break down in details, but you're going to discover that the 4th Amendment has to do with search and seizure primarily. And so we're going to deal with the topic selections here, and when we get to week 2 next week, be ready for me to cover that. And then I want to remind you, this is the link that people get mixed up. This is the link that you're in now. So those of you who are here, you use this to get to me. This is the same link I use for every class that I teach. And so a student says, why did you do that? So the same reason that if you were physically on a campus, I can use the same room, but I have different times that I teach different topics. Then the student says, oh, my bad. Well, anyway, you'll find I have a sense of humor. And so that's the one you read. But when you get to the recordings, which, by the way, this lecture will be recorded, and when it is recorded, it'll be provided to you, and I will put the link under here. The way I do my recordings is that you'll see a note oftentimes where it says something about a problem with WebEx. You can disregard that in my class because I convert your lectures, the lectures I do, to MP4s and then upload them to YouTube, and then at the same time you can get the link and it'll take you directly. So the link will be here and I email it to you as well, okay? So notice here that our first lecture is actually the open house today, which lasts until 10 or after. Next week, we pretty much follow that hour. It'll be an hour or less. Starting, now notice today, it is Tuesday. But next week, through the rest of the weeks, it's going to be Mondays beginning the 7th. And if I got my calendar right, which I believe I do, that the 7th is next Monday. Okay? And so I'm all excited. But today, October 1st, by the way, just a little digression, October 1st, I'm very excited about today. Those of you who are my friends on Facebook, which I invite you, if you aren't, just send me a friend request, Richard Wright JD, and I will be happy to accept it. And it has a lot of information about yours truly in addition to what you saw in Student Lounge. But today is a very good day for me. It was 8 years ago today that I started teaching at Rasmussen College. And so I found myself at a point where they started me out with business, and then I told them, no, don't put me in business. I said, put me in criminal justice, and that's where I stay. So anyway, I'm excited about that. So now let's go on and let's talk about this side here. Again, I've already shown you the guides. This is about the writing process, and you can open that up and it'll tell you the steps for the writing process. And then there is the academic integrity announcement. Now, I want to take a minute and I want to share this with you and let you see it. But the way I want to do it is I'm going to go to resources. It's the same one. You can go back and see it later, but I'm going to move this right now. And I'm going to take off my headphones so you can hear this, because it's actually closed caption. But I want you to pay close attention to the details in this video.
What is academic integrity? Academic integrity is making decisions in your academic life that are based on honesty, trust, fairness, responsibility, and respect. This means being honest in the work you do, while respecting the work that others do. So what is cheating? Cheating means distributing or receiving answers or information by any means other than those expressly permitted by an assignment's requirements or an instructor. Some examples of cheating include asking fellow students for answers or copying answers during a test, using notes, devices, or materials during the test that your instructor has not approved, purchasing papers from websites or other sources, copying your classmate's work, assisting a classmate in misconduct, and other violations as noted in the academic integrity policy that can be found in all course syllabi. Always ask your professor if it's okay to use notes during the test or to work together with classmates on an assignment or quiz. Now let's talk about plagiarism. Plagiarism means using another individual's work without giving them credit or taking another person's work and claiming it as your work. Some examples of plagiarism are turning in an assignment that someone else wrote, copying words or ideas from someone else. This can be a library resource, course textbook, internet resource, or other material without giving the original creator credit. Failing to put quoted works in quotation marks, or using someone else's ideas in your essays, but changing a few of the words to make it sound like the words are your own. Plagiarism is not just about written words and ideas. It's possible to plagiarize images, graphs, coding, or video as well. So how can you avoid plagiarism? Cite your sources, both in the body of your paper as in-text citations and on your references page. Whenever you want to use words, images, media, or ideas that were created by another person, you should cite that person appropriately as the source of that information.
But how does academic integrity relate to the work world? Isn't it just a college thing?
No. Integrity in the workplace starts with good practices and skills built while you are a student. Would you turn in a project document to your manager as your own when someone else wrote it? Not if you want to keep your job. Individuals can be reprimanded or even fired from their jobs for plagiarism. Following academic integrity guidelines while you are in school builds those skills and ethical practices that carry through to the workforce.
Okay, I understand how they're connected, but what do I do if I need more help?
If you have questions on the academic integrity policy, consult your course syllabus, talk with your instructor or dean, and if you need assistance with APA citation style or how to avoid plagiarism, contact the Rasmussen library team through our live chat or schedule a research appointment on our library website or through the resources tab of your course. If you would like APA tutoring, schedule an appointment with one of our peer tutors on the course resources tab.
Okay, let's plug this back in. Okay, so share that with you. And you can, like I said, that's one place. And you can also, like I said again, you can also copy and paste the link and put it on your own browser and you can take a look at it. So it's there for you to remind you. So now you understand why we focus on APA and citations, because it's an academic integrity issue. All right. So now let's get to our announcements. First of all, I want to start with the welcome announcement, which by now you've seen this. And it is very important that you pay attention to not just who I am there, but these things that are highlighted, like announcements, student lounge, course mail. And read this very carefully, because this is a announcement that I have set to remain in the course for the whole 6 weeks. And it reminds you about things that you should do. We will go over the syllabus in a few minutes, and I will go over the calendar. The calendar is so important to you guys that the whole calendar is already reproduced for you, which I'll show you in a few minutes. General course questions is where anyone can answer the questions and has an opportunity to learn from each other. That is usually found under the discussion tab, and you'll see it says general courses. Don't put personal things or things that you want to ask me, because everybody will see it. And then I've already introduced you to the resources tab. The report tab is something that I don't use, but that's how you get your grade book. And then there's some other announcements and reminders, such as remind you about the open house, reminding you that lectures start next week that are not open house, that last less time than the open house, and last an hour or less. And we'll be discussing issues as well. And so you can find each week the lessons tab. It will tell you what's going on. And then the Get Started folder, you can do that on your own, okay? So now let's get to every week you will receive an announcement, at least one, probably more now, from me. And this is the main announcement. And in the main announcement, it tells you, number one, what the topic is for the week, Foundations of Constitutional Law. It tells you what chapters to read, 1 to 3 of your textbook. And you should also be aware that I have emailed you and provided you, as I will each week, that coincide with the chapters, the PowerPoints. I will not use those PowerPoints during the lecture, but I provide them to you to help you to outline your course. You guys are probably too young to remember Cliff Notes. When I was in college and law school, which was a long time ago, I graduated 41 years ago from law school, we had this thing called Cliff Notes, which kind of gave us a summary on a topic, and we utilize that. Well, the PowerPoints do exactly the same thing and give you some valuable information on the module itself, and then it helps you to understand what's going on. And then there's usually an activity in there, and I'll share that with you in a little bit, the Constitution and the Supreme Court this week. And then it reminds you about the open house and the link that I told you there. Finally, it talks about two things. Number one, it talks about the discussion assignment, which this week is exploring judicial review and the important amendment. Now, unlike some courses that you've had, there in several weeks, there are 2 discussion assignments. Each one require an initial post, which is due by Tuesday or tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and a reply post by Saturday, every Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And you want to make sure that you get those in. They're very important. I do encourage you to follow the rubric about the discussion forum. I think, let's see, did I put that rubric down here? I think I did. Let me double check. I might have skipped over it. Nope, I did not. Well, the discussion rubric, I will send it to you. But many of you are familiar with it because we've used it over and over. The key thing is to make sure that you have a lot of content and information and demonstrate that you've done some research and critical thinking. One of the things that you'll see when we discuss discussion posts in a few minutes in the syllabus is that we don't want short answers, good posts and all that. No, we want you to elaborate. We want to demonstrate that you've actually given some thought to answering the questions. And a few of you have done that already. I've replied to 2 posts, one on the topic of exploring judicial review and the other on the important amendment. What do you think is the important amendment? And so the point of the matter is that you want to try to reply to as many posts as possible. That's fine. I appreciate it. You don't get extra points for it, but it's very, 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 very important. So many of you are familiar with discussion posts because you're at the point of bachelor's. Finally, complete the written assignment, the preamble this week, which I showed you already in terms of the rubric a few minutes ago. And notice that that assignment is due, as every assignment is due, every Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then the rubrics are found in the classroom under the Lessons tab, and it's also found on the course homepage as well. But the course homepage is where you'll see your rubrics, all right? And that's how I grade your papers. And then a reminder about the open house. Now, I encourage you to start strong and finish strong. And at the end of this, you're going to learn about what this motto means to me. Some of you already know, but adversity is the springboard to success. I'm going to share with you some items, some information that relate to my experiences and why I'm strong in terms of that. Now let's take a quick look at the course calendar, which I talked about earlier. Okay, we can move this back. Wait a minute before let's see, I want to go back to the course calendar. I want to move this back over here. Okay, so you see where we are here. And this course, we started yesterday, and click on it, and you'll see the reading assignment. So you click on here. There's initial posts for both of them, and then today's live lecture. Again, tells you the time that we have our live lectures. And notice today is Tuesday. You will not see it under Tuesday anymore. And then your reply posts, which are due Saturday, and then your written assignment, which has a due date of Sunday. And then your keyword is due. And that's what these check marks are for. If you click on this, it'll say the written assignment due. If you click on the next one, it'll say the live classroom. And so that means that's when your key word or phrase that I'm going to give you today. And then we start again next Monday with the live lecture. And then you can see going down that from this point, lectures are Monday. And you see that the last lecture, we go to, just to show you, in November, because this class actually ends November 10th. That's the final exam. So the last lecture will be the 4th at 8:30, all right? And so you'll have on all assignments must be in by the end of the 10th, because then I will be grading this, and the course will be over. If the assignments are not submitted on time, you're going to run into a problem. Now, I do want to make this announcement that for the first 3 weeks, I will accept assignments that are late for weeks 1 through 3. Once we complete week 4, hear me good what I'm about to say. We complete week 4, I will not accept assignments 1 through 3 as late assignments. I'm saying that because we're at midterm at that point, and we will be heading towards the second half of the course. And so that's what I wanted to share with you in that. So now let's go to the syllabus. Before I go to the syllabus, yeah, that's all right. Then I'll come back and I'll do module 1. So here's your syllabus, and your syllabus just tells you information about myself, and it reminds you of some information I've already shared with you, and it explains what the topic will be and what we're going to cover. Then it says no text, but there is a text, and you know what that text is. Then it tells you what your assignments are and so forth, your readings, your discussion assignment, which I've discussed, your written assignments, then the course project, and then again I shared that it's going to be related to the 4th Amendment, and we'll discuss with that each week. There will be a midterm, which consists of 15 multiple choice and true-false questions that'll cover modules 1 to 3. That's why I said what I said a few minutes ago. And so after week 3 is over, week 4 is the second half. But I will accept assignments that are done after that. Now, you might lose points, but I'll still accept them. After that, I'm not going to do it. I've had students that get to week 5 and they want to know if they can do weeks 1, 2, or 3, and I say no, you can't at that point. And then your weekly lectures, which you are required to attend. And notice the breakdown in terms of points. For discussion posts, you got 550 points, or 31%. Written assignments, 480, or 27%. And course projects, 500, or 28%. So if you add those two together, that's almost half of the course right there. And then your live classrooms, you get 10 points each week for 6 weeks. So that could be the difference in A or B. And then your exams divided in half, because there are 2 of them, 180 points, or 90 for each one. Okay, so you want to make sure that you maximize your points. Now, I want to say this to you right now up front, that don't ask me a question about how to get a C in my class. I'm not going to answer it for you. Those of you who've been students of mine know, because you could be a C student all by yourself. My goal is to get you to A and B, or as I like to put it, honor roll and dean's list. And so if your grade is below 80, your total grade is below 80, you're going to get a C plus. If it's 80 to 89, you're going to get a B to the B plus, B minus to a B plus. And then 92 to 90, and then above 92, 93, you're going to get an A. So the key is I work with students to try to get you up in the 2 top, and at worst, the 3 that follow after it. So the top 5. So don't ask me about that, all right? Now, got that clear. And then other things about incompletes, you have to look at that yourself. And then these are my responsibilities, which I try to do. Grade all assignments by Friday at midnight after the assignment is due. So what that means, if your assignments are due Sunday, which they are due this Sunday for week 1, by Friday of that week, I'm going to try to have all of your grades in. I generally try to hit it, but because I have so many students, sometimes I find myself where I'm able to get it by that Saturday or Sunday. But I'm going to make an effort to try to get your grades in like that. Sometimes, as soon as you submit them, I'll grade them, but that's going to be very rare. All right? So it says when communicating with me, please include your first, last name, as well as the course in the communication. And then I already told you about that earlier as far as texting me. So now I want to talk about 2 things here. First, I want to talk about transferable skills. We have identified that there are a number of things that employers want each of you as students to be proficient in, and we stress these, and that is why the assignments are the way they are, keeping in mind with these transferable skills. For example, communication. Written and oral communication is a strength that most employers need, and you know already yourself. And particularly in criminal justice, those of you who find yourself in law enforcement, if you don't have good writing skills, you might provide a sloppy police report. I, as a defense attorney, which I was for many years, utilize those to make the officer look bad. And I wasn't taking advantage of them. Do a good job. So we want you to be good in written and oral communication. Critical thinking, I've already kind of talked about that, but it is essential. Employers want you to be able to be good critical thinkers and be able to share details and information as far as critical thinking is concerned. Digital fluency. I am 69 years old. When I came out of law school in 1978, there was no such thing. There was no technology, but now we have technology, and you need to be able to navigate your LMS, your learning systems, and your LMS is Blackboard, and be able to do the things that are necessary. You need to be able to use things like Word documents, because you download your assignments, not in PDF. Don't send your assignments in PDF. The instructions tell you Word. And the reason why is so that I can edit, so that I can review them as well. And then I can't Grammarly run papers through Grammarly that are PDF as well. And you will get a 0 if you do so. But digital fluency is important so that you learn how to utilize the email. You learn how to utilize all kinds of systems, understanding how to operate WebEx, and that is how to get it so that you can hear. And I see some of you get it right away, so you'll be able to hear the lecture as well as see it. And you've got to activate audio every week in order to be able to do that. Diversity and teamwork, they go hand in hand. You're going to work with individuals in your careers that are from various areas, law enforcement, forensics. You're going to work with police officers, detectives. You're going to work with probation officers, parole officers. I've done all of them, correction officers, and you're going to deal with that. Diversity is you're going to deal with people from all ethnic backgrounds, from all persuasions of life, different religious cultures, different sexual preferences. And so the point of the matter is that we have learned and teach students that it is important to recognize that you're going to deal with people who are different from you, different races, different cultures, and you're going to respect those cultures, not ridicule them just because you don't agree with the way that they approach stuff. Just like, for example, I told you already, I'm a pastor. I'm a Pentecostal pastor. I have friends who are Catholic, and you figured it out. You should know that already, though. The truth of the matter is that we, as Protestants, understand that those individuals who are Catholic, we appreciate, even though there's supposed to be a difference. I have people who are Jewish, and they worship differently, but we still respect different beliefs. And people have all kinds of beliefs because people from all over the world are here, and their cultures are different. People in our community, African American community, for Christmas, they celebrate Christmas, but they also celebrate Hanukkah. And it's a celebration for everybody, but it came out of African American community. The point of it is not a right or wrong. If you celebrate and mention, somebody said Black Power, Polish Power, Irish Power, that's an ethnic thing and a culture that people should respect. It's not separatism either. Know your heritage, know who you are and where you came from, those kind of things. And you need to be able to recognize that. Spanish, you're going to run across a lot of Spanish-speaking people. I always recommend Spanish as a top language because of the fact that the fastest growing population in the United States is Hispanic. And so you're going to find yourself in those. We here at this school have a diversity and inclusion committee that we encourage faculty, staff, and all involved, and we share it with our students that we respect each other. Now, how do you operate in this online course? Guess what? You're going to respond to people's positions in discussion posts, and they're going to be different from yours. I've had many discussion posts where students have said things different from what I do. Your grade is not going to be affected by because I disagree with you, but the quality of it will be graded, and foul language is not permitted. Ridiculing someone is not permitted. Bullying is absolutely zero tolerance. And so diversity, we respect each individual from where they came from. And then we deal with ethics and professional responsibility. God, I can't say enough that in criminal justice, ethics are very, very important. They're important in everything. But I always tell people that ethics is taught at home. However, there are systems. Then there's a course that you take that help you to understand ethics. What ethics basically boils down to is operating and following the correct processes and procedures that a reasonable person would follow in terms of performing whatever they do. And that applying right and not wrong. I know that there's a whole issue which has gotten some law enforcement people in trouble called the Code of Silence. And then there have been instances where police officers have gotten in trouble for writing reports that now that we have video cameras around that demonstrate something differently than what happened on the scene, and the police got together and tried to cover it up by writing reports that was the opposite. Don't do that. There have been people that have gone to jail, lost their jobs. We had some police officers in Chicago who were charged and indicted on a criminal basis, but they were found not guilty by the judge, which the people were unhappy about. However, though, the Civilian Review Board did subsequently discharge those individuals and they lost their jobs. So ethics is so important. And then professional responsibility. Almost every organization, entity has a code of conduct that you want to be proficient in. And so we do that. With the ethics here, we start here in the school because it is, in a minute I'm going to talk about that. When you take your tests, be aware of the fact that we say that you shouldn't have materials in front of you. It's closed book. Now, we can't follow you around to see it, but we can tell if your test has 10 questions and you have 10 minutes and you only do one, that means that probably you were trying to research that one answer. You can't do that. You got to do that before and put it away, the information. And then also you're going to see the ethics issue down here at the bottom in our academic integrity policy, which I don't read over, but I encourage students to read. Then finally, information literacy, being able to utilize proper resources. I've already told you Wikipedia is out, making sure that you use credible. You know how you make sure that you use credible material? Use the library and learning resources. You will not go wrong because they've all been vetted and they've all been provided, and you won't run into those problems at all. So information literacy, being able to research, being able to find the information. That's why earlier there was a statement that if you do your assignments and that you don't do any research, you're going to lose points. So we're trying to get you to understand, because you're going to do research projects even after you leave school. So you'll have an opportunity to to show all of these skills in your assignments itself. The assignments, as I again finally say, were put together with that in mind. Attendance policy, I'm not going to talk about, but I am going to talk about the late assignment policy. Be aware of the fact that this statement up here that says that students can submit assignments up to 7 days after the deadline. But be aware that each day after the deadline, you lose 10%. Now, the way that I do discussion posts is discussion posts are due, i.e. Tuesday nights for initial posts, i.e. Saturday nights for reply posts. Each day that you're late from them, you will lose a point. But after discussion forum ends, which technically is Saturday night, if you submit your initial post and the reply post on Sunday, you get 0. If you submit your initial post late, before Sunday, or on as late as Saturday, and then you submit your reply post on Sunday, you will lose points for the late submission of your initial post, and you will lose a point for your reply post. And that's the way it operates. So make sure you get that. I have had students that said, oh, you said that you will lose 1 point if you submit it on Sunday. I said, if you submitted your initial post before the deadline, which is Saturday night, 11:59 p.m., not your time, but Central Standard Time. All right, those of you on the East Coast shouldn't get that confused because you're an hour ahead of me anyway. So if you get it at 9:30 submit your time, that's fine because that's 8:30 Central Standard, or should I just put it this way, 11:59 Eastern Time is early for my time here. So if you get it at 12:59, then you've actually got it until 12:59 on the East Coast, because 11:59 is going to be that same exact time here. So you got that based on the different time zones. So now back to the regular written assignments. I have the power as your instructor, not your dean, not your advisor, not anybody else, not your campus director, to not my department chair, but it says instructors may waive the late penalty in case of extenuating circumstances. And I consider extenuating circumstances on a case-by-case basis. I've already had a student to tell me that one of the weeks they're going to be on vacation and that they might be late with their assignments. And I told that student already, and I'll tell you now, vacations are not extenuating circumstances. I used to do that, but then it was brought to my attention by my dean and others that no, that's not right, because that has to do with planning in terms of time. And so as a result, what I've done now is that I will deduct points for that. I will not create problems with you if you are in the military and you're on military assignment. I don't want to see your letter. I don't want to see your note. I don't want to see your obituary that somebody died. I don't want to see that you were in a hospital, your admission papers and all of that. I'm going to operate on the basis that you're going to be one of integrity. Remember, it's a basis of trust. Eventually, though, if you're not doing that, you will trip yourself up and you can run into a problem and possibly not only get a 0, but possibly be dismissed from the course and or program. So those are the things that I want to share with you. Don't even get comfortable with making up with labs or anything like that. We don't have that in this course. But one of the things I do tell students, I had a student to say to me, can I get some extra assignments to make up for the assignments I missed? I said, did you hear what you asked? How are you going to ask for something extra when you haven't completed what you did? To me, my definition of extra is when you completed everything you're supposed to do and then you want to do something above that. And generally, I discourage that. Get to do what you need to do in a fashion where it's following the rubrics, following my expectations. And then if you have a question about something, contact me before you submit it. I respond pretty fast. So that's what I want to say about late assignment submission policies. I'm not going to deal with this. And then you can read the academic integrity policy yourself, because we're moving along. So now I got to get to showing you what week 1 is all about. I'm not going to go into detail. Here we go. Let's do it. So each week, again, you click on the assignment tab, and it will tell you this. So now if you clicked on this, it's going to tell you the due date. As soon as it opens up, here it is for a possible 80 points. And you know how you get the 80 points, because I gave you the rubric. Now, what it tells you is, going back to the assignment, it says rewrite the preamble, and the instructions are given here, and in the rubric itself. Rewrite the Constitution, add in anything you believe is missing, and so forth, and all the other things here, and submit that information. And again, I already explained that it should be a Word document, submit in your Dropbox, and then it tells you how to do that. Then your discussion posts for each of the 2 topics. One is exploring judicial review, one is important amendment, and then your live lecture keyword, which is also due on Sundays. There it is right there. You'll see it there. It's due by October 6th, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. So those are your assignments for week 1. All right. Now, I will be elaborating more on these things in future weeks, but I'm just showing you what the format is that you have. So now let's go to lessons, the lesson content. This is where you will find a repeating, first of all, the objectives. Then it'll tell you about your reading, and it'll tell you what chapters in the book, which I also include in the announcement, chapters 1 to 3. Then you come down here and you see it again. Then it tells you the little topic that we're going to discuss, just briefly show you, and then your written assignments, which I've already covered, and then your live lecture. So now this right here is the Constitution and the Supreme Court, and you take time to click on these power links, and it tells you different things. I'm not going to go over these. You go over these yourself. The Bill of Rights is something important that you want to download and save, because you're going to utilize that. And then you're going to spend most of your time in this course dealing with the what we call the criminal law and procedure amendments, which is the 4th Amendment, which is the one that has to do with your course project. We'll elaborate more on that next week. The 5th Amendment, which has to do with self-incrimination, and the infamous Miranda versus Arizona case. You know that one as the right to remain silent case. And then 6th Amendment has to do with speedy trials, as well primarily of dealing with the right to counsel, effective assistance of counsel as well. And it talks about those things that you have the right to be, and you have a right to assistance of counsel, and actually we've interpreted that to mean effective assistance of counsel. And then we talk about the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, and again, the government is divided into 3 branches. The executive branch, which is Congress, they pass the laws. The president should be enforcing the laws, and then the Supreme Court interpret the laws. They're the highest court in the land. And so these Supreme Court justices, as you already know, are appointed for life, and that's the subject of one of our discussion posts this week. And the Supreme Court, if you click on that, it'll give you more details. And about judicial review. There's a famous case that we studied when I was in college called Marbury versus Madison, and it said, pretty much set the precedent that it is the court that interpret the law, okay, and that they determine what it means. And so the United States Supreme Court is the highest court in the land as far as determining that. So that's week one. And so those are the things weekly that I will be dealing with. Again, the PowerPoints have been sent to you by email, and you can download those that coincide with the chapter itself. So, having said all of that, I am now going to go into wrapping up. And the way I want to wrap up is I want to remind you that, as I've shared with you before, that at the end of each discussion, at the end of the primary posts, you will run across the statement that says, adversity is the springboard to success. I want you to know who your professor is. Again, some of you probably already know that. I think I see one student in here who I've had in other classes and associates and will probably know this. But I can't stress this enough, why I am so dogmatic about excellence in terms of you doing a good job. I will not talk about this except this week. It all started back when yours truly was 7 years old, going back to 1957. My dad, he loved baseball, and he took me to a baseball game Memorial Day of 1957, which during that time was the 30th of May. Now is the last Monday in May celebrated. So during that period, what happened is that my dad took me to the game. When we came home from the game, there were my mom, and who is his wife, and a lot of people were at the house, and they were, you know, barbecuing, they were drinking, they were playing cards, they were doing all kinds of things. And so it came to night, and myself and 5 of my younger sisters, again, I was 7, I was the oldest, were put to bed. We all shared one room, and we had bunk beds that faced different directions, and that's how we were. Well, sometime that night, a fight broke out. There was a man who, his name was Scott, who rented a room from us. That my mom met him at a tavern in the neighborhood, and he ended up living with us. Well, at some point that night, a fight broke out, and the fight ended up in the bedroom where I was laying and my sisters. And it was my dad and this guy. They were wrestling. And so the guy, someone flicked on the lights, and I would later discover that it was my mother. What happened is that my father was pinned in the corner, and the guy took out a knife and stabbed my dad in the forehead. And blood came pouring out. Guys, I'll never forget it, because I have a gift that God gave me that works against me in terms of bad things, and that's called a photographic memory. But for most part, it works in my favor. So I remember things that I see. And I still remember it like it happened yesterday, from May 30th, 1957. So the guy runs out of the house. The police take my dad away. And I remember his eyes were open, but the blood was pouring out. and they took him away, and then of course, he died. Well, a few days later, the man was back in the house. This time, he was sleeping in my mother's room with her, where my dad previously slept and was no longer in his room. Well, I didn't understand what was going on, but I would find out that what happened is that there were no charges brought against him because my mother, who was the adult witness, along with myself as the oldest other child in that room, said that it was my dad who was the aggressor, which wasn't true. So he ended up, in the legal terms, they did what they call noli prosequi, or didn't prosecute. That's a Latin term that we learned in law school. And so the man began to fight my mom openly after that. And we spent the next 5 years, from 57 to 62, in that house on the west side of Chicago, where the area had gotten pretty bad. The gangs and so forth were operating there. And the gangs decided not to try to recruit me for either one because they knew what I had gone through with my dad. So back in those days, the gangs were different. So at any rate, my mother became the victim of domestic violence, and she was beaten constantly, and I used to have to take care of her as the oldest one and rub witch hazel on her bruises where the guy inflicted the punishment on her. So it was pretty bad, and it was frequent. And the guy would go to jail, and then she would go back and get him and bring him back. If you ever take domestic violence, there's a thing called cycle of abuse, and it is part of, I think that's the exact name. I've forgotten because it's been a while since I taught it. But those of you who have had it know what I'm talking about, where there's a tie to that individual, and that individual will constantly hurt that person, but they will keep reaching out for that person. So that went on from 57 to 62 at that area. My mom became pregnant by this guy, and another child was born. It was a girl. And then she became pregnant again, and a second one. So in 62, we moved from that area and moved into a nice single-family home. The place we were living before that was a 2-flat that my parents owned. So we moved to Gary, Indiana, in a nice community, and this guy moved with us. Well, the beating stopped because an aunt came from Michigan, and she was a tough character. She didn't tolerate anything, and she carried a pistol. She was kind of like, if any of you know the character that Tyler Perry created called Medea, that's the way she was. Her name was Aunt B, or Bernice. Well, anyway, the point of the matter is that he wouldn't do anything. So we went from 62, where we started school in Gary, Indiana. I was in 6th grade at that time. And she left early part of May of 63 to go back home to be with her husband in Michigan. Well, coming ahead to Memorial Day of 63, we had a bunch of people over. They were barbecuing again, just like they, in 57. And by the way, each year they still had those gatherings. So this one in 63, my mom left and told me to take care of the house and to take care of my baby sisters and make sure that, because I was the oldest one. I was 13 years old. And the baby, I think she was like either a year or a year and a half. So at any rate, she left me in charge. So we went to bed that night, and I woke up early the next morning, and there was smoke in the house. And I opened the door to let the smoke out. Well, I discovered that there was barbecue left in the oven, and that's what triggered the smoke. Well, what happened next is that I saw the car pull off with my mother which my mother had, and I checked her bed, and she hadn't slept in it. But that wasn't unusual because there were times when she had a restaurant downtown, a barbecue restaurant, that she would be gone and I would be in charge of the house. So anyway, it was discovered that this man turned on the gas, and he actually came to the house to get rid of us. But because of that, he didn't know that something was in the oven. But anyway, the point of the matter is that he pulled off and left. Didn't see me open the door. So we went on about the day, and sometime during the day, two gentlemen show up at the door, identified themselves as police officers, and they announced to me. They came in. I told them at first they couldn't come in, but then when they showed their badges, I let them in. They announced that my mother had been found dead in Chicago. I started yelling out the man's name, Scott, Scott, Scott. I lost my cool. And so I quickly looked around, and I saw that I had to get it together because I was what they had, all they had left now. So we ended up staying in that house, and then an aunt came, not the one from Michigan, but another sister came and took us to her house in Chicago, in what we call the Chatham area, and we, all 8 of us, moved into her house. But she made it clear that we were there temporarily because they were going to determine what they were going to do with us. They were going to split us up, send us various places. We would have possibly ended up in the foster program. Well, my aunt from Michigan got wind and came back. And by the way, when we were living with my aunt, when my mother's funeral took place, I went to the wake and I lost it. So I never went to the burial. I never went to the funeral because I couldn't handle it. So anyway, we stayed at this aunt's house, and we had to do things like we were the servants of the house. She had kids herself. They could go to the YMCA. They could do all kinds of things, but we had to pull weeds manually with our fingers. We had to mop, clean walls. We had to do all kinds of things to earn our keep. So it was pretty bad. I remember one occasion, and this is pretty bad, that they had pizza, and they were upstairs in the same complex, but they had stairs that came down to where we were in a lower level. That was really a nice place, but they had pizza, and they brought us the crust and what was left over. And that's how we were treated. So it was pretty bad. So my aunt from Michigan came, and she said, no, I'm not splitting them up. She says, I'm taking them, and I'm going to keep them. So she took myself after I finished my 7th grade in the area where my aunt's house was, and we moved to an area called Maple Park, further south in Chicago, in the Morgan Park area, and then I started going to school. And she had a brand new house built in that area. Well, I had my own bedroom again, because I had my own bedroom. I forgot to tell you when we were in Gary, Indiana as well. That was the first time I ever had that. So I had my own bedroom, and my aunt and her husband had a bedroom, and then my sisters, they split their rooms up and shared. So anyway, it was pretty rough even living there because my aunt and uncle would get into it constantly. I remember an occasion where they pulled guns on each other, and we were caught in the middle of it, and I ran out of the house. So it was still pretty rough. And I never got along with this man because he wanted to adopt. They wanted to adopt everybody in the family, but I didn't want to be adopted because of the fact that I wanted to keep my dad's name. And I didn't know at the time that you could be adopted and then keep the name. But at either rate, I didn't want this man listed on any birth certificate as my father. But because of something that I found out years and years later when I was an adult, they did something illegally and I was actually adopted. I never on any license or anything else even got married with my name as Wright. So I went through some pretty tough times there. I would find out years and years later that this man sexually assaulted my sisters. So it was bad. So at any rate, went through high school and let me back up. I was still in grammar school, and so I was 14 years old in 64 when we moved to that house. I would find out in 64 that Scott was going to be sentenced because he pled guilty to 10 years. Now, 10 meant 5. And I further discovered that for good behavior, he would serve 3.5 years. Well, that distressed me. So I constantly questioned this doesn't seem right. So what happened is that someone, finally, after I was questioning what can be done about this, they said, well, there's these people called lawyers. Well, I didn't know anything about that. The only lawyer I knew was a TV show, Perry Mason. And so anyway, I ended up going to school as an 8th grader, asking the librarian for a book on lawyers. And she let me check out this one book they had, and I took that book home and I read it from cover to cover overnight. The next day, people, anybody I met, I didn't care if I knew you or not, I said, my name is Richard Wright, and I'm going to be a lawyer. Well, as soon as I announced that, I started having people that came to me and says, no, you're going the wrong way. That's too hard. That's difficult. One of the people who told me it was difficult and that I wouldn't succeed is the aunt that I stayed with and that wanted to split us up. And it was pretty tough during that period. And so I found myself in a situation where I didn't respond to her. I just knew what I wanted to do. And so at the same time, being discouraged, I heard a lady on the radio and I liked her voice. I was 14 and I went and found this lady and asked her to be my mother. Well, she of course ran into problems and she laughed and we became friends. Of course, I'll speed ahead. Years later, after I graduated from law school, and she became legally my mother and adopted me. But I was allowed to keep my dad's name, and I got his name back. And so that's the way I operated. Well, the thing that I want to tell you next is that while I was in high school, the church in the neighborhood, which I started getting involved in because I did everything to stay out of the house, agreed that they would give me a 4-year scholarship. All my aunt and uncle had to do was sign. He said no. And so I said, that's okay. I'm going to do it anyway. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up graduating from high school. Some friends at the church, they let me come to stay at their house because my aunt left that house to chase this man who was chasing women. So it was still pretty tough. So I graduated from high school, and the lady that I had asked to be my mother, she was around, and she was a friend, and so she ended up finding herself where she was reaching the point where she would spend time with me, but it was pretty difficult anyway. So I ended up moving in with my friends, and one of my friends' mothers got me a job working at a law firm. So here I go, right out of high school, in the mailroom at a big corporate law firm. And when I got there, I met the lawyers. I introduced myself, and I told them the same thing I told everybody else after I met. After that, my name is Richard Wright, and I'm going to become a lawyer. And I was going to school at night. Then I went and did something that made it more complicated. I got married. And when I got married, I ended up leaving my friend's house and then taking a small apartment. And I started school, and my first wife at that time, she started school. She was starting to be a teacher, and I was studying pre-law. Well, I ended up staying on the honor roll dean's list. I rode a bus, and two buses and an L train every morning to get to work. And I would go, leave home and have to be at work at 8:30. I'd get off at 4 and have to be in classes downtown at what was called Loop College, which is Harold Washington City College of Chicago. And I carried a full load. I usually carried 3 to 4 courses every quarter. It was semesters then at that time. So it was a lot of work. And then we used this thing called books then. We didn't have technology. So what happened is that I did well. I stayed on the dean's list and the honor roll. And then there came along not one, but 2 kids in a row. Both of them were girls. And so it was pretty challenging. In the meantime, the law firm saw that I meant what I said. They promoted me into what's called a file clerk in their law firm. And they saw that I continued to be industrious, and they then put me in and asked me if I would be interested in becoming a law librarian, because something happened to a law librarian. So I went from a messenger to a file clerk to a law librarian. During that period, I met people who would have talks with me, like the late Ray Kroc. In case you don't know that name, he was the chairman and founder of McDonald's. And he would talk to me all the time and tell me, he says, keep going, you're very smart, you're going to succeed. So I did. I continued to succeed in the law firm. In the meantime, I left the City College of Chicago Junior College and got accepted to a 4-year institution, Roosevelt University, where I declared my major to be political science, minored in business. And so I did well there and continued to progress, continued to deal with challenges and struggles, and I found myself to the point where it was time for me to make a decision about law school. I had already decided what law school I wanted to go to, and that law school was Northwestern University School of Law. Now, I was quickly told that it was a challenge getting in, but you should know something about me. I don't run from a challenge. I run to a challenge, and if I've set my mind to something, I decide I'm going to do that. And whatever obstacles may come, as you've already heard obstacles, that I don't let them stop me. Now, it took me 7 years to complete a 4-year degree for college, but that was okay. I didn't stop. I just had to lighten my load a couple of times because I ran into some problems. But I overcame those problems. I stayed on the dean's list. I stayed on the honor roll. I kept getting good grades. I kept studying. I'd study on the L train. I'd fall asleep on the train at the end of the line, and the people would wake me up. I would get home, and I'd have to study, and then get up the next morning and have to go to school. Go to work as well. So I did that, people. I graduated with all kinds of honors from Roosevelt University in 1975. And so when I submitted my application in 74 to the law school, I submitted not just the regular application, which was about this thick, but I submitted supporting documents, and the package was about as wide as my hands here. So I had all kinds of stuff, writing samples. I even wrote a story about what I went through in my childhood and the challenges that I overcame. So the law school had quickly provided materials to us as students that, or potential students, that they don't do interviews. However, they called me and invited me to come because they wanted to know who was behind all of this written material that they were getting. So I went to the campus in Chicago, which is where the law school is located at Northwest University. The main campus is in Evanston. And I sat in a room with 4 people who asked questions of me about my package. And it must have went on for about an hour or maybe 2 or whatever. It was a long time. So finally they said, thank you, we'll be right back with you. And they left the room and left me sitting in the room. Well, they came back, and I remember one of the people said, we enjoyed everything that you said. We appreciate everything you say, but we don't make decisions about accepting students based on this type of process. But they said, we will tell you this, and this is what happened. We will be sending you some correspondence in the next few weeks that we think that you'll like. Well, that was their way of telling me. And so 2 weeks later, I got a letter being accepted into the law school. And so I ended up in the law school. And so I was excited. I was there. And so at that particular time, it was made clear to me that in my first year of law school that they would not allow me to work, and that the program was very, very strenuous. The curriculum was challenging. So I started saying, okay, I went into it. At that time, the person that I was married to had graduated, 75 also, from college, and started teaching in the Chicago Public Schools. Well, during that particular school year, which starts right after Labor Day, classes had started 2 weeks before that. I was doing okay. And then it was announced that they were going to have a strike. Well, there went the income, the only income that we had. And so I worked through it a little while, and then I reached a point where it just became very difficult. The lights were turned off. I had to study by candlelight. We had not enough money to buy food, so we had canned goods and stuff. It was a challenge. It was tough. But guess what? I stuck it out. Finally, it just got to me. And I told one of my professors who became a good friend and mentored me, I told her I was going to have to take a leave of absence. She said, before you do that, come to my office. And I went to her office, and she sat me down, and she stood behind the door and said, Richard, I'm going to make a deal with you. You're not getting out of this room until you say that you're going to stick it out. I will help you as much as I can. I don't have money to help you with, but I will help you. So I took her up on it, and I decided to go on through. And then, of course, it was still a challenge. They ended the strike, and then they went back to work. And then I was able to complete my education first year with a challenge. And then I went back to the law firm and worked that summer, and then earned some money. And then I went back for my second year and third year of law school. And 78, on schedule, I graduated. And one of the people that I thanked that congratulated me was that professor, who is still, by the way, at the law school now. She's been there all those years. So anyway, I ended up graduating. Now, while I was in law school, I met a number of people. One of the people I met was the father of one of my classmates, and he encouraged me to pursue a career as a criminal defense lawyer, because I said I wanted to do criminal law. Well, he was a distinguished criminal defense lawyer, and I went to his house because my classmate took a few of us law students to his house, and I shared with his dad and mom what I went through, and he said, you need closure. So he made it possible for me to get the records for what happened in both cases, with my dad's murder in '57 and my mom's murder in '63. So anyway, I heard him, and I decided when I graduated, and I decided to go back to the law firm to work from 78 to 80. And then in 1980, I said, I'm ready to leave corporate law, and I want to go into my dream, which is criminal law. So I left and started working with other lawyers. I didn't like their ethics, so I started my own practice and began to do all kinds of things. Now, remember the lady I told you who became my adopted mother? She was in my life while I was in college, while I was in law school, and she was there, but she wasn't legally my mother. She helped me out as well, as much as she could at that particular time. So I had people who were supporting me. So, by the way, let me go back to the graduation day. When I got ready to graduate before that, I made a list of people I was sending invitations to. The first invitation went to that aunt. Remember the aunt that I told you way back when I first announced I wanted to be a lawyer? Remember the aunt that told us that I wasn't good enough to do that? Remember the aunt that told me that she was splitting us up? Well, that aunt was the aunt that got my first invitation. And she, as well as the aunt whose house we stayed in, came to the graduation. Her husband did not, but she did. Well, the aunt who had doubted it, I never told her that I was going to do it. She was able to see. Do you not know, good people, that that was the first date that she began to own me up as her nephew? So anyway, that's a little side story. But anyway, so I ended up deciding to practice criminal law. I started doing radio at the same time because the lady who would be my adopted mother was in radio, and I had seen her operate well, and I became familiar with these radio stations, and I was invited to do a show called that we called Know Your Rights, which WRIGHTS was what it was, and my name a play on words. So I ended up becoming very popular with representing people. I ended up not just doing criminal, but I ended up doing family, entertainment, sports, radio, TV, and then church law. Well, 91 to 93, I went to seminary, and then I became a minister. And so I started incorporating ministry into my practice as a lawyer and how I handled my cases. I did pretty well as a criminal defense lawyer. I was in the high 90 percentile in my findings of not guilty. And that was partially because of my understanding, but also my photographic memory. And so I moved on from that particular point. And so my first wife and I, we began to go in different directions in life, and we ended up not together. And she and I had a third child, which was born in 1978 when I graduated. So I had 3 girls. So then I married a young lady I met the second one. And it was a pretty tough situation. But one thing that did happen that I didn't know that would come back later and work to my benefit was that her mother would become the mayor of a tough town in the south suburbs called Ford Heights. Well, I became her village attorney and then village prosecutor. I also wanted to carry a gun, but she said only police officers. So I went to the academy and became a part-time police officer, where I participated in drug raids, street stops, traffic stops, and all of those different things. Blocking traffic, roadblocks, and I did all of that stuff. I wore a bulletproof vest. I had on, I was almost like on one of those teams that you see on Cops on TV. So I did all of that. In the meantime, the chief gets indicted, and the new chief comes in and asks me to be his internal affairs investigator because he found out I was clean. So I did that. So I wore all those hats. So going back to at the law firm, as I was a law librarian, they found out that I knew how to research. So I was then promoted to what they call a law clerk, which today is called a paralegal. So I've worn all these hats from this program. And so in the meantime, I would discover my second wife, who I had my fourth child, which also was a girl, was doing me in by cheating with the pastor of the church. So I ended up getting out of that. So it was crazy. It was a lot of crazy stuff going on. And so I ended up finding myself back in about 1994. Enough was enough. And then near the end of the year of 94, I was still practicing law, but I was getting ready to the point where I was going to slow down. I ended up meeting a young lady, and we became friends. And then in 95, July 28, 1995, we were married. This year, she and I were in Florida for our 25th wedding anniversary, and we participated in the graduation for one of my students that I surprised by appearing at his graduation at Newport Richie with her. And so anyway, my wife that I'm currently married to, she and I began working together. Doors began to open for me. I announced in 2000 that I was done practicing, and I started doing things like I ran a janitorial company for a nationwide company called Service Merchandise in Illinois. I was responsible for their 26 stores. And then they shut down, and then I started doing closings for title companies, so I was hanging in there. In the meantime, we had these kids, and they came. They came one by one. First we had a son, then we had a daughter, then we had a son, and then we had another daughter. And you see those people on my profile. Well, what happened is that I found myself teaching special education and dealing with at-risk kids. Finally, from the period of 2001 all the way to roughly 2010, I did those things I told you about. Service Merchandise went out of business, I think, I forgot what year, but then I started just doing closings. Well, finally in 2011, someone came to me and told me about this organization or school that I had never heard of. And they said they're looking for somebody to teach business law. And I said, what's the name of the school? They said Rasmussen College. I said, I never heard of them. So I did what I normally do. I did my research. I started checking to find out about them. And I went online and found the information I needed. And I said, I don't know about this school. So then I started checking who was behind the school and the board of directors. Well, I discovered something that said, okay, this is good. The chairman of the board was the former president and became president emeritus to Northwestern University, not the School of Law, but to the entire Northwestern University. That was instant credibility for me. And so I took the job and I started working there, yes, 8 years ago today, October 1st. And they hired me to teach business law. And it was residentially at that time. So I taught that class, and then I made it clear to the dean that I was a criminal justice person, and so they transferred me over into criminal justice as an adjunct professor. And the struggle still continued because I wasn't getting a full-time salary. I still continued to do closings, but it was pretty tough. It's getting tougher. Finally, in about 2013, they said, well, we're going online now. The whole program's going online. So I had to learn the systems of online classes, which I had never done. And so I worked well at that and continued. Finally, in 2014, I saw an opportunity because while I was an adjunct professor, I used to help out, and everybody thought I was a full-time professor because I had so many hours that they saw me. Well, I ended up finding myself in a situation where the position opened up for state program coordinator of the School of Justice Studies. And yours truly applied, and they hired me for the position. And I became the state program coordinator responsible for the School of Justice Studies in Illinois. And there are 4 campuses in Illinois: Romeoville, which is my home campus, Mokina Tinley Park, Aurora, and then there is one in Rockford. And so I continued doing that until 2015, for a little over a year. Then finally they came about and says, we're changing the setup, and we're going to have we're doing away with the program coordinators, and we're going to give all of you guys 2 more classes, and you're going to be teaching that. So I had 3 classes while I was program coordinator, because coordinator took up basically time for 2 classes as well. So that meant that when I became a teacher, an instructor, in 2015, then after that, I had 5 classes. And it was really, really, really something. It was a full load. So I handled it, and I began to work with students online, making myself known to students the way that I still do now, and working hard with helping students. And so I reached a point where at first I was an associate professor, and then I climbed to assistant professor, and now, as of 2 years ago, I became Professor Dr. Richard H. Wright, B.A. J.D., and that means Bachelor of Arts, and J.D. is Juris Doctor for Law degree. And so since that time, I have been teaching many of you guys in this class online, and students before that. I have made it clear to my students, as I do now, that I am really going to be a tough person in terms of the requirements of the course, but that I also at the same time am the leader of the team. I consider my position as leader of the team, and that you guys are like sports, the players, and I'm the coach, and we work together and successfully navigate it. And my goal is, and it was then and still is to produce ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice students. I have worked with students down through the years. I have written letters of recommendation. I have just talked to employers for students. I've done whatever it takes to continue to reach out. One of my students ended up at large as a member of my church. He lives in Florida, but he looks at my Facebook information, and he is actually a member of my church. And I finally met him when I went to his graduation and surprised him when my wife and I went to celebrate our anniversary. We went to his graduation at Newport Richie. He's at the Tampa Braden campus. He completed his associates, and now he's nearly completing his bachelor's. He took this course with me a few quarters ago. The point of the matter is that I'm here to be of service to my students. That's why I started out by telling you about you can text me, call me, email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. And now you know why I say my motto is adversity is the springboard to success. I've been pretty successful. I've been blessed. I love my students. I invite you again that if you are interested in becoming my friend on Facebook, you go to Facebook and type Richard Wright, J.D. with a space, and I'm entering it now so you can see it. And I have many former students who I reach out to, and they reach out to me and respond. Matter of fact, I thank God that today I posted on Facebook about my anniversary, and some of my former colleagues, former students, And yes, yes, I have a Facebook. Yes, yes, you should know that. You've been in my class before. Maybe I didn't mention it before, but yeah, send me a friend request and I'll accept it. There are people who have been in classes years, and they're my friends forever. After that, we stay connected. So, you say you don't like social media. Social media is as good as any other tool. If I use it, if you get on it and look at it, you'll see, wow, and I'm there, and I'm able to be reached. I have my phone number on there and everything. I have my personal email address, and then there's a lot of things I post on there. By the way, the school here, we use social media a lot. We post announcements about job openings. We post information about courses and all those different things. So we use it, but it's all about how responsible you are. So I do encourage people to utilize that. So yes, you can reach out to me in that. So with all of that having been said, it's a little bit after 10. I'm about 17 minutes over, and I'm going to say good night to you. But before I do that, I have to give you something that I want you to give me to get your points. And that one word is based upon what I've shared with you today that will drive you and keep you. And remember this, as you go through this course, as you've gone through other courses with me, I'm very empathetic. I'm here for you. But guess what? I don't have a crystal ball. But I do operate when you need me, but I got to know about it. And be honest and be straightforward. And don't wait until weeks down and say, I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to bother you. Well, then now you bothered me. So that key word for today is adversity. That's it. Just give that to me, and you'll get your 10 points. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you guys. I look forward to the next 5 weeks where we will be going through the materials. Well, I will be able to navigate the waters with you. You do your part, because I'm definitely going to do my part. And so you guys have a great week. And you're wondering where our key terms are for practice and such is in the lessons. Now, you know, it's not in, sometimes I give it. I'm the one who give that at the, and I usually give it at the end, but sometimes I mention it throughout the lecture, as I did here. But then I revealed that's actually it. So, okay. So I will say good night to you, and hope to see you guys next week at 8:30. Remember, it's going to be Monday night, not Tuesday nights from this point on. And it's not going to be till 10 o'clock. It's going to be, sometimes it's not even going to last an hour, but it's going to be 8:30 Central, and the parameters are 9:30. So I'm going to say good night, and you guys have a great week.